First of all, I'll start with a very generic question, which will be around the shift that we are talking about from
Yeah,
agentic versus generative. So
yeah.
everyone is talking about Gen AI right now, but you are now an agentic AI architect. So in simple terms, what is the biggest hurdle when moving from an AI that just answers, which are Gen AIs, to an AI that
Mhm.
actually acts on the behalf of a bank or an insurance company in finance sector?
So maybe I should reframe that question a different way, if you allow me.
Absolutely.
So what I see is more like this. The shift is actually, um, in my opinion, the progression is more towards agentic. So generative AI, right? You know, it's it, it's what we know when we talk about things like, an interface to chat in
Yeah.
natural language. You get some feedback. You can ask it to do certain things. It can be like it's like summoning an expert. Anytime you want it, you can tell it to act like an expert in, I don't know, in banking, or you can tell it to be an expert in terms of, travel, and then it will book your travel trips and everything. So you have a way of exchanging information. You don't. It, it's limited in the sense that it's not like agentic. Agentic is more like it's mostly almost semi-autonomous.
Yeah.
So you can set it to a task. You can set the boundaries of the task, and then it goes off and executes it. So this is what the just give me a second. I'm going to switch to
Yeah.
heads free. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the difference is that today, right, the way that things are going, you take an industry like banking or FSI, right, where it's a regulated industry. They're not really interested in creativity from the perspective of when they ask a question that the LLM should become creative in the sense that it starts to create what is happening, or it looks for things and tries to answer the question. They don't want it to be creative in that sense. They want to have consistent answers or responses, and they want to restrict it to documentation that is in, for instance, if it's documentation that they have inside of the bank, they
Hmm.
want it to be specific to that, not to hallucinate, not to come up with something new, what sounds great by pulling things together, but really what is there. So consistency is very much important. Um, so in regulated industry, this is the expectation. So agentic is more, it's going more in that direction where you have you give, there's a human in the loop, but you
Hmm.
also give autonomy um, to the agent to do specific tasks, and not just one agent, but agents also talking to other agents,
Hmm.
and in a multi-agent system, and then you want them to be basically like work like digital workers. So I think the future is more agentic right now than it is just generative AI. Generative AI still remains, but it's more the way that companies are adopting it is to have more and more digital workers. They never
Got it.
tire.
Yeah.
You have them do work and they execute it. You look away for a while, you give them boundaries, they stay within that boundary. They are able to navigate what it is that you set them to do in terms of the task assignment, and then they deliver results, and they can work 24/7 without stopping. They can just go ahead and execute on the task that you set for them. I think
And
that's the way that a lot of companies are going. And Amazon just sacking or letting go over 16,000 people of his workforce, which is 1% of his global workforce, is also how do you say, a testimony to that. They're going to automate more and more jobs, more tasks, and it's leveraging agentic AI. Apart from the fact that Amazon anyway is selling um, the agentic AI, its own agentic version of agentic AI to businesses already. Amazon Core.
right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's another topic.
I got it. And what about you? You mentioned that companies are adapting agentic AIs to do
Yes.
specific task. But is
Yeah.
it just the I would not, I don't want to use word boring here, but generally very, very small tasks like documentation and all of that. Is it because there is still a lack of trust with agentic AIs, or it's just they are starting to give them smaller tasks and see how it goes, and afterwards they'll try to adapt more of the agentic AI in different workflows?
I think that it's not just it's that small, right? Because we're talking about moving a business that is very much, they know their business very well. Now you're
Yeah,
trying to, and they have many controls, right? And it's very, very important that whatever AI product is created, it be compliant. So they have to start with maybe not multi-agent, like
yeah,
agent to, they will start with small things, like for instance, based on an orchestrator like lang graph, and then they'll choose, okay, there's no multi-agent, there's just an agent to do a specific task
yeah.
and to execute it semi-autonomously and within the boundaries. So they'll start very simple, like you mentioned, the chatbot and that sort of thing. But then it becomes more complex after a while. They have a foundation that they have to do, which is to look at all the controls that they have in the bank, look at the risk that is associated with every control, decide which of those risks are specific to agentic AI, and then do the gap analysis. They have to look at establishing a center of excellence,
Right,
to coordinate this, and then they have to decide the center of excellence is going to be top for any AI product in the company. All of this stuff happens, but it's looking at it and aligning their own new procedure, new guardrails for agentic. So they're going to start very modestly, look at the risk, look at how they mitigate the risk, look at what it could be in the future if they wanted to build on top of that. There's a lot of alignment that has to first happen from a policies perspective within the bank,
right.
for instance, before they can go any further in terms of making it multi-agent. That's another stage or phase in the maturity of the bank, shifting their processes, workflows, seeing how, studying it in little instances, looking at what they can mitigate, certain things that will be read-only, so they doesn't touch any of the source systems. It just takes information from them, but doesn't change anything. All of these things are what they'll start with, and then they'll go further from there to build on top of that. Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense. And the next question is, I think, very similar to what I asked in between in terms of security. In
Yeah.
finance, of course, security is everything. So, and
Yeah.
you were an SME in confidential computing in Microsoft,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you will be
Yeah.
working in the same domain even now. Uh,
Yeah.
does the risk of an AI agent making a mistake or leaking data keep the business managers, up on their
Opportunity.
toes? And how do
Yeah.
we build guardrails that don't kill the innovation?
So I see that question as a two-parter. The first part is to do with the technology itself, so confidential computing, right? So the Confidential Computing Consortium, they've been working on this for a while, and I mean, they have a yearly meeting in the US, right? And I think last one of the years it was in Texas. Anyway, so from what I could follow and what I've been part of that consortium for a while, like a member, but it's been adopted in different companies in different ways. Like for Microsoft, for instance, um, the adoption of things like for data and for cybersecurity, it's usually about it for, data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. So
Right,
data in use is the one that is really about confidential, right? Because you don't want anything to be stolen while it is in memory, right? So the memory
right,
has to be kind of like concealed or in inaccessible to. It has to be only accessible in a very secured way. So um, that's the reason why Microsoft adopted things like, and I made available to customers things like Databricks Confidential. So where you have confidential computing for Databricks, um, and some other, there are many other instances. That's just one of them for data. Now, so that is the confidential computing part. It's still very much an important piece. And there's some work that the CISOs are also doing to adopt this. CISOs is Security Information Security Office or officer. But there's also a piece that is a shared responsibility with DS. So the data, let's just say the chief data officer, CDO, right? So there's a shared responsibility, not just lying on the CISO side. Then, so that's confidential on one end in terms of the data in use and cybersecurity controls around that. Then the other part of it, which was the other part of your question, is in the context of a bank, how does that come across? So in a bank, the CISO and the not just the CISO but the TISO, meaning the Technology Information Security Office,
Mhm.
they are very much vested in making sure that the data behind the scenes, there's worry that agentic will, because it accesses data, just what it, staying within the boundaries, never going out of its boundaries to complete a task. So they also look at, I'm also right now working on that to look at all the controls that are available to make sure that it doesn't, the controls are not circumvented even by an internal actor who has access to those agents to compromise more information that they should have access to. So it is a worry, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they have to be compliant, because if the regulators, like one of the regulators for the banks in Switzerland and also the insurances is FINMA, if FINMA, the regulator, feels that when they do an audit, they feel like the agentic system, it doesn't comply to, I don't know, the EU AI Act or some of the strict regulatory banking and regulations or banking regulations in Switzerland, then or that the bank doesn't have its arms well wrapped around the problem or the agentic AI solution,
Mhm.
they will not approve for that to be operational. The audit will be negative. So the bank itself makes it its duty to make sure that it mitigates that already, such that the agent doesn't go outside of its remit, and also the data that is accessing it, after it passes that data to another part of the workflow, it's not lying somewhere that can be easily accessed. This is part of the things that the banks are looking at, and some of the insurance companies decide to go with sovereign for that, Microsoft Sovereign Cloud, to make it possible such that everything is self-contained and doesn't go outside of a certain boundary as well, from a data perspective, not just from an application or agentic perspective as well.
Got it. And what about, I mean, you have worked deeply with Microsoft Data Fabric. Uh, for an
Yes.
for an agentic AI to work, it needs access to clean real-time data, right? Is
Yeah. Yeah.
bad data
Data
still,
intelligence. Yeah.
yeah, is the bad data still the number one reason that these AI projects fail, or have we moved past that? There are different reasons for that.
So yeah, you're right. With data fabric, there's the data you have to procure, right?
Mhm.
Maybe that's not the right word. You have to curate the right data, meaning not just the right data, but also quality data, clean
Right.
data. So the data sets have to be clear, and you have to assure a good pipeline, meaning that when your data is loading every day, that you have processes in place to make sure that the data is cleansed, that you have good master data references, that your data quality is where it should be. And that means an alignment between not just your data warehouse, but also the source systems as well, meaning data coming from an ERP system, or other sources as well. So it's to answer your question, it's not the number one. I would not say that is the number one reason why agentic AI projects fail or those type of projects fail. No, the often it is actually to do more with um, control of the different parts of the workflow, meaning the connection to data, the use of data,
Mhm.
the production of the outcome that you want, which is the specific work task, and then the repeatability of that, and then scalability of that. Usually, that's where you have to align policies. You have to make sure that it's the way that the data has been accessed is self-contained. The security parameters that you put around it is correct and it's compliant. And
Okay.
then from data usage itself, where it ends up, who has access to it, who, and that all of these things that you put all along the way, it checks out because it has to be compliant with the way that the bank, for instance, decides that it wants to um, what it defines as an AI product and how it is um, staying within the boundaries that it's been set in terms of the compliance of the house and the policies of the house. So that is what sometimes slows things down because you might be able to build an agent very quickly, but that it will become operational and then
Yeah.
supported with by IT and all the other people that is a completely different kettle of fish. Yeah. So I think that's where it fails, and also in terms of scalability, because you are going to build on top of that, and it's going to then start to talk to other agents. And the way you do
Yeah.
that is quite important. So there's a framework that Microsoft wrote for establishing an agentic AI center of excellence, also for deploying AI at an enterprise. Such that it is you have an enterprise AI system that runs and a platform, and the adoption of that has been more and more the trend right now with a lot of companies who are seeing the need to establish a center of excellence. They know that they cannot just farm this out to a company to do it like a company like Accenture, because although a company like Accenture can help with some of the moving pieces, the fact of the matter is the work of actually looking at the business, the policies in the company, and tailoring to what their controls are is very much in the banking business, for instance. So the bank will not it knows about its business. A third-party company cannot, or a supplier or vendor cannot have something. They can't just come in and just do the work for them. They have to also get into that industry, understand the controls, key procedure core controls. Um, I don't want to use too much banking terminology, but they have to understand all of this to be able to then ensure that the the project is successful. So I don't think it's just the issue is just the data quality, because data quality is about data. For me, it's about data intelligence, that you have really clean data that you can understand from a business intelligence perspective or from another insights perspective, cloud analytics and etc. That is proven. It's more about then what happens with that data and then doing it on repeat for other tasks that you want to set in motion that people normally would do and
Yeah.
exercise judgment to complete, and replacing that person or replacing that workflow part of it anyway with via an agentic framework around it. Yeah, that's a sticky point.
And I mean, of course, there are challenges for controllability and scalability. Other than that, the kind of things that you mentioned, once we deploy an agentic AI, there is a lot of process involved from big companies in general to, approve that.
Mm,
Do you think
yeah.
if this same workflow was implemented in a smaller organization like a startup, it be
Hmm.
much more efficient according to you?
That's an interesting question. Would it be more efficient if it's a smaller company?
Yeah.
Um, it depends on the business, really. I think it depends on the business. Eh, the like a small company born in the cloud native, right?
Yeah.
Um, they have a lot of these things already, as you say, access to resources and to, the platform and etc. Like Azure, for instance, take Azure, for instance, yes. But will it be quicker? Uh, with literacy, yes, it can be quicker. But then to to build it up such that it becomes like the processes are all, a lot of them are agentic as far as they can do it, and it's multi-agent. I think they still will face some of those challenges of making repeatability, scalability, and ensuring that it works within the right boundaries
Got it.
of security boundaries. Yeah.
Sense. And what about, I mean, it's a totally different question than this. With Microsoft Purview, you have
Hmm.
handled governance too, and the risk
Yeah.
management side. So when
Yeah.
an AI agent starts making decisions, who is responsible? how is data governance evolving to handle autonomous systems that work without a human in supervision?
Who's responsible? I'd say that the person that's responsible always comes down to the the developer of the system. That's what they say, right?
Yes.
Because the person needs to be very aware of what they are, the accesses of the agent, etc., and also the visibility that is required to make it compliant, and that the right when there's an incident, if there's something that is outside of the boundaries, that it is detected.
Yeah.
Content safety is also a very big of importance. You know, the manage, the monitor, I think is manage, monitor, and mitigate model for that compliant. That is very important for in compliance. That is from a responsible AI perspective
Mhm.
as a model, I think, and also from a so content safety falls within that responsible AI model, but also Purview. The Purview is it's linked is what Microsoft has or uses for compliance, right? It's the tool, and of course, it's not alone. Purview works with Purview looks at metadata, but also it also works with Sentinel, for instance, a SIEM, and you might implement the policies in uh, for instance in Purview, but then the enforcement of the policy is usually, and also the notification of what's wrong, what's not going, what's been infringement is captured inside of the scene like Sentinel.
Okay.
So, and you also can also, of course, Microsoft also, customers also use Defender, there are many products within the Defender box, but it probably doesn't work on its own. It works with the other two services to bubble up incidents and also to enforce, not just to set the policy, but also to enforce it. And when it is infringed, to bubble up the infringement up the way to Sentinel, and then the logs and everything else can be reviewed, and then action can be taken. So inside of the AI Foundry, or even Agent 365, the newly released Agent 365, there's a also an integration with Purview. There is also I won't go into too many details, but all that to say that the platform, the Foundry, is set up in such a way that is also um, acts as a way to cater to governance, risk, and compliance for customers.
Mhm.
Not all customers want to adopt it that way because they have other requirements, but things like the AI gateway, the AI gateway, or AI API, APIM, which in application, um, eh, you're basically your API manager, right? Um, you want to, because a lot of these cybersecurity attacks is at the API level. You know, when you have an endpoint, it's there. When someone should not, you showcase all the things that your program or your application can do, but someone can make the call whereas they shouldn't have access to be able to make that call because they don't have the rights, so, or the clearance. So Microsoft has put out like APIM as a way to protect this endpoint and also protect who can call and that sort of thing. But it's not on isolation. Purview is part of it. Defender is part of the story. APM is part of it. Defender is part of it. Sentinel is part of it. So what I'm trying to say is that the platform that Microsoft provides through AI Foundry enables different roles to collaborate together, removing the role silos between the security teams, to the application developers, to the database administrator. And that's the idea, that they all are co-responsible for the data part, the application part, the infrastructure ops parts, and they all come together to work. And the security part, of course, yeah. So I see it as not just one piece, but it's okay. Maybe it's a pie, and there are many slices. Yeah.
Makes sense. A few questions about the challenges. I mean, challenges as in the pain points, and because that's what I'm also looking at from a perspective of a relationship lead, where we are planning to move forward with creating learning resources around the knowledge gaps and the pain points. So you
Okay.
mentor a lot of future leaders. What is the one thing technical teams are ignoring right now that is going to, uh, create a lot of hurdle in 1 year or 2 year? Is it like the cost factor, latency, or just a lack of proper architecture?
Um, I think that if I could just mention two things. See, a lot of people, fine, a lot of people, the teams, when they embark on a project with that has to do with agentic, I think one of the things that they focus on is more like tooling. Um, but I think that that's not the place that it should be starting from. I think it should start from having a good foundation, an understanding of where they want to get to in terms of the product that they want to create, and and who will maintain it and how it will be connected to other products that will be built on top of that. So one of the key things that I think is important that the focus you turn towards is establishing a good foundation. And foundation also has to do with, of course, the people with the company, right? So that's the first thing. Because on top of a good foundation, you can then build. So not to focus so much on tools, but to focus more, start with the end in mind. Um, who will be so it's more going towards that eh, eh, sense of excellence, having having a good pragmatic way to and sustainable way to do this, and it's things stay compliant. It's not like everybody's doing their own thing in different versions and in different using different tools. It becomes a mess. Okay, so that's the first thing. Alignment and thinking of the foundation of for building and setting up and establishing a good foundation. The second thing that I think is pretty important has to do with um, cost. Costs is something that people don't really factor in. They think, okay, I'll run this agent, but the agent, it runs in its own context, right? And that context over time, you have a lot more, it has a lot more information. It's been doing this. So all of this information is just there.
Yeah,
And how do you clean that out? And how do you make sure that it doesn't keep on uh, spending more money because it's running? It's a thing that I think is related to maintenance, but also uh, vigilance. Making sure that there's a process that does maintenance and cleans, and I think it will definitely impact costs
yeah,
because as you build more and more agents, as you build more and more solutions, there's a cost impact of running those efficiently. And so I think teams might not necessarily be thinking about also maintenance and clean maintenance practices for the agents. Mm, that then makes as a business model sustainable because the outcome that most companies want is things like, because of this agent running the job, we've unearthed about 3 million more in revenue. That's what they want.
yeah,
But if you don't have a way to clean it up and also make sure that it's doing that consistently, you end up the cost that you get from running these agents, operationalizing them, will exceed the profit, the benefits that you are might expect in terms of benefits, cost benefit analysis. More you're paying more for than if you had a human worker. So I think that's another gotcha. Yeah.